Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of the Sports Insight with your host Amdar Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you information about sports from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is at the rate of Indus News Sports. That basically works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, we'll go to the headlines first. And yes, from the world of NBA, Washington Wizards win against the 76ers 122-114, while Utah Jazz beat the Grizzlies 120-113 in Game 4. And yes, from the world of football, Barcelona has confirmed signing Eric Garcia from Manchester City for a 5-year deal. And yes, from the world of tennis, world number 2 Naomi Osaka has withdrawn from the French Open. And yes, from the world of rugby, Exeter Chiefs ran a 12-try riot as they trounced Newcastle Falcons 74-3 in the 20th round of Gallagher Premiership. And yes, those were the headlines, and surely we'll start off with what's happening in the world of NBA. Yes, not to forget the playoffs are still on, and a very, very interesting journey in terms of the matches. And to discuss the in-depth analysis of the matches, we have with us Abbas Abed, who's an NBA expert. Abbas, welcome to the show.
Always a pleasure, Vandar.
Great. So, Abbas, it's been a strange journey in terms of the ups and downs of the playoffs. And of course, I would surely want to start off with truly Washington Wizards, obviously their victory over the 76ers. And not to forget that, Joe Embiid actually had that injury. And after that, things really, really took a drastic turn. And eventually, Wizards won against them. So, what's your take on the match to begin with?
First of all, we are very deep in the first round of the playoffs, and now the real picture of how the playoff teams are playing out comes to front.
Right.
And it was very unfortunate for the Philadelphia 76ers to go down the way they did, especially for their star player Joel Embiid getting injured in this game against the Washington Wizards. This has been a great series so far for Philadelphia. They were leading 3-0 coming into this game, but then again, with major firepower in Joel Embiid going out with the injury, not only takes their star player away, but also puts the morale down of all the players involved.
Right.
Ben Simmons and Danny Green and Matisse Thybulle have all been playing great basketball. But Joel Embiid was their main focus. He was the main point getter, rebound getter, defensive stance for the Philadelphia 76ers.
Right. And when we look at the stats, of course, in terms of obviously where the 76ers were, they were leading in the first quarter 20-12 when the injury happened. So I think just losing this one individual, obviously one key person, has actually brought them to a loss against, the Wizards.
Yes, because the intensity or the magnitude of the loss is just too much. Joel Embiid is an all-star. He is an all-star today. He will remain an all-star for years to come. And we all know how important he is for his team, especially in the postseason. And he was locked in this time. We remember, when he went in for the jam in the last game and he was getting the crowd involved. So he was just locked in and he was putting up big numbers. So that was a huge loss, and that is where everything just flipped over for the Philadelphia 76ers. I still believe that they will win this series, but not having Joel Embiid for some part of the playoffs will really, really hurt their chances to proceed in the Eastern Conference.
Right. And I think if we look at obviously the stats in terms of obviously the quarters, the first quarter, obviously 76ers were leading 31-28. The second, and obviously slowly and gradually things started changing for them. And I think in the third quarter, they were totally off the hook. And they scored only 19 points in the third quarter, whereas the Wizards actually managed to score 32. And here we are, seeing the 76ers losing against the Wizards is definitely going to be a huge loss for them.
Yes, it is a big loss, but nothing to take away from the Washington Wizards. They have played great basketball all year long, especially Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal. And also in this game, Russell Westbrook scored a triple-double with 19 points, 21 rebounds, and 14 assists.
Right.
He's a triple-double machine to go along with 27 points from Bradley Beal. And also Rui Hachimura was a great showing. He scored 20 points and he had 13 rebounds. So it was a good game for the Washington Wizards. But then again, The after the injury for Joel Embiid, Philadelphia did not have an answer or a replacement for Joel Embiid, and hence this loss goes to them. Let's see how it plays out. I don't think that Joel Embiid will return during this series, but still he's day to day. And as reports come in for his injury, we will have further update.
Absolutely right, and let's hope the injury does come to a point of him coming back, because if the situation scenario remains like this, things will definitely go in a very different direction for the 76ers. Anyways, we'll quickly jump over to the second game, of course, that I wanted to discuss, which is the Utah Jazz beating the Grizzlies 120 to 113. How do you see that going far for Utah Jazz?
This has been a wonderful series, especially we know that when the young players come up and they step up and they play big in the playoffs. It's always a good sign for their franchise. It's always a good sign for the NBA in general. Right. So the two stars in this series have been Ja Morant and Donovan Mitchell. So in the first game, when Donovan Mitchell did not play, the Memphis Grizzlies were able to take that game. But since the time he returned, Donovan Mitchell returned, Utah is back in their power. And, they're showing why they were the first seed in the Western Conference. And this game was no different. Donovan Mitchell, again, was as a prolific scorer he is to go along with Jordan Clarkson. So Donovan Mitchell with his 30 points and Jordan Clarkson with his 24 points were good enough to, take the lead of 3-1, which is somewhat a decisive lead in the first round. And Memphis had a really good outing, and we all know that Ja Morant is a future superstar, and he's putting up big numbers with his 23 points tonight to go along with 12 assists. Right. But they had to take that loss, and Utah had the 3-1 lead.
If you look back into obviously how at one point obviously the Grizzlies managed to win that one game against Jazz, and everybody was in an absolute shock. But I think for Jazz to making a comeback, and now obviously they lead 3-1.
Just one more game remaining for the Jazz. I believe that they will get the job done. They have been playing really, really consistent basketball throughout the regular season. And it will be a good time for them to finish the Memphis Grizzlies off early, right, and then move forward. They are the first seed, and it is fitting for them to just finish off the 8th seed as quickly as possible. But hats off to Ja Morant and his group. They've been playing good basketball. And Ja Morant stepping up for his team shows good future and good poise for the youngster.
Right. Now I'll quickly jump over to the most, obviously, whenever we talk, obviously, Nets, we'll talk about how the Nets have actually managed to get their victory against Celtic 141 to 126. And obviously, finally, we see the trio working.
Yes, this has always been an interesting series, and everyone was intrigued by the moves made by the Brooklyn Nets. And me and you have talked about this back and forth every single time.
Right.
So this game, 141 to 126 victory over the Boston Celtics, shows their firepower and how good the trio can be. But at the same time, if you look deep into it, it also gives us an insight of what potential flaws can be for the big three. This game was really, really amazing. All the three prolific scorers in Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving stepped up big. 42 points for Kevin Durant, 39 points for Kyrie Irving to go with 11 rebounds. And then James Harden had 23 points with 18 assists. So this was a heavy, heavy game for the Brooklyn Nets. But we all know that Jason Tatum has played brilliantly throughout the season and also in the playoffs. He was coming off a 50-point victory in the game 3, and here he scored 40 points in the loss against a really, really heavy Brooklyn Nets team.
Right. And if we look into the entire situation, obviously the frustration level was so high in terms of obviously Celtic losing against them that one of the Celtic fans was arrested for throwing water ball at Kyrie Irving.
There have been a lot of things going on off the court, or especially involving the fans. There have been 3 or 4 instances where the fan has been, either banned. 2 of the fans have been arrested in this playoffs. There have been altercations with many players, which includes Kyrie Irving, Trae Young, and a lot of other players. And this is not a good sign. I think this might be the frustration from the pandemic or their team losing coming out. But this has become kind of a norm for this playoff, and the NBA has to do something about it to make some changes to the rules for the fans. But obviously, Kyrie Irving had something to say or do to the Boston Celtics logo, and the Boston fans did not enjoy that very much. And we're seeing all the Boston players or the ex-Boston players are coming up and rallying with the current Boston team to support their squad, and talking back and pushing their comments on Twitter and social media against Kyrie Irving. So there's a lot going on off the court as well.
Right. And how do you see things developing in the future in the game 5, which is tomorrow, obviously the Nets facing the Celtics? Because I think now it has come to a situation in which we can actually consider this more as a war now.
Do we have a bit of time, Alamdar, so I can possibly explain the flip side of the Boston Celtics or the Brooklyn Nets? Excuse me. They put up staggering numbers in this game. They scored 141 points in 98 possessions, which equals to about 144 points per 100 possessions. This is the 6th highest efficiency in the last 25 years of NBA basketball, playoff basketball. So they are really, really efficient. And, Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving combined scored twice as many points as the field goals attempted. Still, they were not able to put that game away, or they were not able to win with 30 or 40 point lead. And the Boston Celtics were always interested in getting the lead back. They were around 10 or 12 points within this. So this kind of shows their offensive power for the Brooklyn Nets, but also shows major defensive lapses that they need to cover. You cannot just let every team put Blake Griffin into a pick and roll situation and selecting him out and ISOing him and scoring every single time. So they need to fix and pick up their defense in order to go deep into the playoffs, because other teams are waiting. Obviously, already the Milwaukee Bucks are waiting for them to come to them in the next round. But in the next game, we know that Boston Celtics will come out big, and the game 5 will be really, really interesting and really, really chippy to watch. The fans and the Boston players, all of them will be pumped up to see Brooklyn Nets again.
Right. And talking about interesting games, one of the most interesting games that I'm looking forward for, which is obviously going to be tomorrow, it's going to be the Suns versus the Lakers, because obviously they have tied so far.
Yes, this has been kind of an unfortunate or roller coaster ride for the Lakers as well. Anthony Davis got injured in the last game, and that resulted in the Phoenix Suns taking that game comfortably, so to tie the series at 2 apiece. And in NBA playoffs, when the teams are tied 2-2 after Game 4, Game 5 is considered the most important game. It is said that the team, statistically speaking, the team that wins Game 5 after a 2-2 draw wins the series 70 to 80% of the time. So Game 5 is really, really important. And Anthony Davis is not there. Anthony Davis will miss Game 5. He will possibly return in Game 6. We don't know how healthy he will be then. So things are not looking good for the Lakers. So LeBron James has to really, really step up now. He has to take the throne. If he claims he is the king, now's the time to show it out and see the Phoenix Suns face to face.
Right. Well, thank you so very much, Abbas, for being a part of the show and discussing the world of NBA with us.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, this is a pretty much interesting scenario so far, and yes, LeBron James actually need to step up when it comes to obviously the Lakers facing the Suns, because the series has been tied 2-2, and there are few more matches coming up your way. We'll surely be covering all of those matches, and we'll definitely update you guys on that. But anyways, we'll take a quick break. Once we're back from the break, there is more news coming up your way after the break. And welcome back from the break. And yes, before the break, we were discussing the world of NBA, but not to forget that we give you information about sports from all across the globe. So we'll talk more about the football side. Yes, and as we know, we still have that same thing that's on our heads, which is obviously the Champions League final. Obviously, we'll surely be discussing that side, but we'll also confirm that Barcelona has actually signed Eric Garcia, who's actually from Manchester City on a 5-year deal, and he will be joining Barcelona on the July 1st. But anyways, to discuss the in-depth analysis, we have with us Natasha all the way from the UK. Natasha, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great. So Natasha, we'll start off obviously with the signing part. Obviously, Eric Garcia is now signing off from Manchester City and going into Barcelona, and the deal is locked somewhere between 15.4 million pounds. So what's your ultimate perspective with regards to, obviously now there'll be more of the transfers, most of the leagues are finally over. So how do you see this impacting Barcelona in the long run?
Yeah, the transfer window is now open and it's a great signing for Barcelona. Garcia actually started his career in the Barcelona Youth Academy before moving to City's academy in 2017. He's made 35 appearances for City, but only 12 this season. He then went on to refuse a contract extension at Man City, which started the rumours of him returning to Barcelona, and now we know that is going to be the case. He's a great player who's already been compared to Barcelona legend Gerard Piqué, another player who had a brief spell in the Premier League as a youngster before returning to Barcelona. So I'm sure Garcia will certainly hope that he can emulate that career, and he's showing all the signs of being a really promising talent that can certainly go on and have a career similar to Piqué. Obviously, it's not just Garcia who's moving over to Barcelona. We've also got the news that Aguero will be joining him there. We saw Aguero's Manchester City career come to an end with defeat in the Champions League final when he came on as a substitute, but he has had an incredible career at Man City. He leaves as the record goal scorer, but he will officially become a Barcelona player on the 1st of July with a contract until 2023. Despite being struck this season by injuries and COVID, Aguero is an incredible talent. He's a proven goal scorer, and despite being 33, he certainly still has that ability to go on and make a great impact for Barcelona. So a couple of good signings there for Barca.
Right. And talking about, obviously, Aguero, one of the major key players for sure. There is no doubt about it. But yes, now the transfers have opened. Would surely want to talk more about how Chelsea managed to beat Manchester City on the final on Sunday, which was one of the most electrifying matches that we've seen. And when I was really looking at the odds, there was a lot of hope from people in terms of Manchester City, and we were looking for that wonder that would happen. And I guess the wonder of Thomas Tuchel actually managed to make Chelsea take that victory. So how do you see the match impacting Chelsea in the long run?
You're quite right. Man City were the favourites for that game, but it was Chelsea who came out on top. And as you said, it was an excellent game, very entertaining, and a great goal from Kai Havertz to win the match. Despite Man City being favourites, Chelsea really controlled the play from fairly on in the game, and they were worthy winners. Something you've touched on is that it was a tactical masterclass from Thomas Tuchel.
Right.
When you watched the game, you knew that every Chelsea player played with a clear understanding of what was required of them and executed that game plan to perfection. In the end, the scoreline makes the game look quite close, but in reality, City created very, very little, and that must be encouraging for Chelsea going forward to have a squad that's capable of such a great performance against a top Man City team. Pep Guardiola is getting a lot of criticism for the performance and the lineup. Perhaps he overthought it, and maybe that is indeed the case. In hindsight, we look back, he included Sterling, who's been out for weeks. He started without Fernandinho or Rodri for only the second time this season.
Right.
So it seems like he altered a system that worked, and it didn't pay off. On this occasion, he was certainly outsmarted by Tuchel, whose transformation of Chelsea continues, and who knows where that can go next season for them. But it's been very impressive since he's taken over. You just have to look at the fact that that's 7 Champions League knockout games, and they've only conceded twice. City have been excellent this season, as we've discussed on this show before.
Absolutely.
But in that Champions League final, they didn't have a shot on target after the 7th minute, and that speaks volumes to how well Chelsea did.
And if we look at the match, to be very honest, when I was in the first half, and when Chelsea managed to make that first goal, obviously, over Manchester City, I still had that hope, because when we look at how gelled in Manchester City were the entire season when it comes to Premier League or Championship, Champions League, we know where they stood. But on that very day, on that main day where they actually had to perform, I don't know, something totally went wrong. Either it was the strategy, because we were seeing Chelsea playing more offensive than Chelsea usually does, and Manchester City was absolutely opposite.
Yes, and you're quite right. This is not the performance that I expected or anyone expected from Manchester City. We didn't see the hallmarks of the team that we have seen all season from Manchester City. And Chelsea's tactics were spot on. And you could see very early on that this game wasn't going the way that Manchester City fans expected it to, with Chelsea dominating very early on in the game. It speaks so much to how good the Chelsea defence were and how compact they were from the middle of the park to the defence, the fact that they really limited Manchester City's attempts on goal. And it was a different performance from Manchester City. As you said, we're used to seeing them playing free-flowing, attacking football.
Right.
They tried something different in the Champions League final. It was a massive risk and it didn't work.
Right, and literally, when it comes to Chelsea, of course, in terms of their performance, things did change for them. Obviously, since Thomas Tuchel actually joined in from January, and I remember the contract finishing from PSG and getting here, and then proving within 5 months what a masterclass coach can actually do to a team.
It really does, and he has to be up there with the best coaches in Europe at the moment, if not the best. He's certainly getting a lot of plaudits, and they're well deserved. It could have been an even better season for Chelsea had they managed to win the FA Cup final a couple of weeks ago, and they were unlucky not to come away with the victory there. So if I was a Chelsea fan, I'd be really encouraged about the direction that my team was going in and how good the performances are, and it's promising to be a very good season for them next season on the basis of the last 5 months here.
Right, and talking about the FA Cup, that was one strange situation that actually Chelsea were in back then, and they obviously lost that final for FA Cup. And once they did, there were so many random statements that were actually out from their side, and their perspective was that, we're trying to practice and we're mentally ready for the Champions League final, and everybody thought that, the odds are way off for Chelsea to win the Champions League final. But here we are, they are now the world champions.
Absolutely. They were unlucky in the FA Cup final. They played well and they came up against a very good Leicester side on the day. But what Chelsea did was they used the disappointment from that FA Cup final and used that in their preparations for the Champions League final. And they went a long way for making up for the disappointment of losing out on that FA Cup final by winning the Champions League. So I'm sure their fans will be delighted with that.
Absolutely. And one more important thing in terms of the strategy. Up till now, all the teams that actually prepare, if they come up to the point of Champions League final, that is the day for all the teams out there. Where do you personally think, what truly went wrong in terms of Manchester City? Because there are too many question marks and too many fingers being pointed at their coach, and still people are talking about the fact that they lacked that strategy of Manchester City, how it truly was in the entire season.
It's right, Pep Guardiola is an incredible manager and City are a very, very good team. What they failed to do in the Champions League final was play the game they know. They didn't play to their strengths, they didn't do what they were good at, and they didn't play that game that they were so familiar with.
Right.
And it showed. By trying to adapt their style, by trying to change things up a bit to counter, Chelsea's tactics, it took away from what they were able to do themselves. And unfortunately, too many players didn't know quite what they were meant to be doing in terms of a new position they were being asked to play and a new tactical setup that they were being asked to play. And when you come to a Champions League final, it's a big risk to make such changes to your style. And like we've touched on, it just didn't pay off.
Absolutely, Natasha. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the show and discussing Champions League and obviously the in-depth analysis about football.
No problem at all.
Great. So that's pretty much the in-depth analysis in terms of football. And yes, it's surely been an amazing Champions League final, which is surely what we've talked about. And yes, now we'll see and hear more of the transfers. As we've discussed that Eric Garcia is actually moving in from Manchester City to Barcelona, and Sergio Aguero is also going to Barcelona. So let's hope all the deals lock in fine, and they're looking for the contract by the 1st of July. That's when the transfer happens, because obviously the season's done. Anyways, I'll quickly jump over to the world of tennis. And yes, it's an interesting update with regards to Naomi Osaka. Yes, if you guys remember, we did give you an information about how Naomi Osaka has been really upset in terms of mental health perspectives. And she talked about not attending the press conference, which was obviously after her first victory. But once she did so, she was fined $15,000. And about that, she eventually came up with a tweet stating that, she still has some mental health issues, and, those issues need to be addressed. And World Tennis Association have actually talked about this, that, we would want to address this entire situation and maybe help her sort the problem. But right now, we just heard that she's announced that she would not be participating in any post-match conferences, and she's withdrawn from the French Open 2021, which is surely a sad perspective in terms of someone like her. And let's hope in terms of the mental health awareness, people do get to know and understand, because during these COVID situations, people do have a lot of issues going through their heads. Anyways, I'll quickly jump over to the world of rugby. Yes, Exeter Chiefs announced I mean, they actually managed to win against Newcastle, which is a huge number of, when it comes to the goaling side. It's 74-3, which is definitely one of the most heaviest markings in terms of scoring line. But not to forget that Henry Slade actually scored 2 tries after the Exeter's chief. And that is how slowly and gradually things are. But the opening half ended with 31-3 lead for the Exeter Chiefs. But anyways, guys, if you want to reach out to us, you can. Social media handle, which is @Indus News Sports. That basically works both for Twitter and for Instagram. Till then, take good care of yourselves and bye-bye.